Hi everybody, this is Steve Kodad of the Feng Shui Cure once again. We're going to be doing a module that's a little longer this time on color psychology. And this was one of the reasons why Feng Shui had a big appeal to me. I could see when I was just doing home staging that color had a big impact on folks. But then when you start to look at Feng Shui and you look at all the ramifications and what they represent, different colors, it made even more sense to me. So it really has been a very important part of me doing business at this point. Now, the neat thing about color is it attracts a person's attention. But it also changes their mood, as you will find out as we get into this. It impacts a person physically and mentally. And it's really one of the first things that anybody notices when they walk into a room. So it's very pivotal that you get this correct. You've seen this slide before. And again, the emphasis, of course, on this slide that I want you to look at is the colors. All of those are going to come into play, of course, when we decide to choose what colors that we possibly paint the wall or what accessories we use. A quick review for all of you, I'm sure, is these are the primary colors. And all very, very powerful, and sometimes can be a little overwhelming. And the tertiary, of course, are blends of the colors to the left and to the right. For example, orange is a blend of the red and the yellow. And then, of course, we have secondary colors, which is, again, a further blend. So, as you know by now, there is a left and right side of this that are yang and yin. So we'll be talking about that, when we get into what colors we choose. Some of these terms are of value to you, but I want you to understand that the way I look at it with respect to a tint, making light and dark, when a color is mixed with white, I sort of think of it as more of a social room because there's a little bit more reflection off of the paint color. And then a shade where the color is mixed with black, I sort of think of it as more of a personal room, like a bathroom or a bedroom. Now, color psychology has been used for a long time. And it does send a very positive or a very negative message to a person. As you can see here, it can encourage more sales in a business. It can calm a crowd. It can make an athlete actually lift more weight. Okay, so there's an awful lot to the idea of how it impacts us physically and mentally. I'm going to go over each color to some degree at this point and give you how I look at it. Red is a very emotionally intense color. I love using it, but it's not well suited for particular rooms in large portions. It actually overshadows an awful lot of other colors. Red accents draw the eye, and I think at this point, after all these modules, I think you can see how important that aspect is to you to try to make sure that the potential buyer actually sees something, sees a positive aspect of that house. Now, of course, the element is fire, and it's a very yang color. Orange is also very yang, and it's also a fire element color. Very energetic. And it does definitely stir feelings of excitement and enthusiasm and encourages socialization. It is a color that not everybody feels comfortable with. So if I was going to use it as a paint color, I'd use it like you see in the picture to your right. I think it looks great on one wall, for example, to draw attention. Okay, but again, keep in mind that this is a color that is a little more controversial with people. Yellow is a great color. I like using yellow in those pots up at the front door as I do using the color red. It's very warm and vibrant. Has a lot of different ways it affects us. And I don't know if you know it, but people actually lose their tempers a little bit more in yellow rooms. And it's been found out that babies even cry more, especially if the color of yellow is extremely vibrant. Certainly, it enhances concentration, which is a very good quality when we're trying to sell a house. I do like to use yellow on the walls, but I don't ever use this bright of the yellow on the walls. The element is earth, and it is an extremely yang color. Now, these neutralized shades are just two of many that do have a broad appeal, okay? Like this peach and terracotta, okay? So even though I'm sort of telling you that I don't want to use an extremely vibrant yellow or too much orange, you can certainly add whites and grays to those colors to actually tone them down somewhat. Green is a color that I use considerably. Very popular. It's very tranquil. What I like about it is very flexible. Very, very restful on a person's eye. And if it alleviates anxiety, can you understand that that's an important aspect of, again, getting a buyer, a potential buyer, feeling comfortable when they walk into the house? The element is wood. It is usually quite yin, and so it's a very popular color for using in bedrooms and in some cases bathrooms. Blue is very calming. I do think of not using too much dark blue because it can be considered cold and depressing, especially for a teenager. And so I really don't use an awful lot of that color when I'm brought in to help, let's say, a teenager with their sleeping. It's not at all gender specific, and it's very much accepted throughout the world. The element, of course, is water, and it's very yin. Purple suggests wealth. It is more gender specific, more feminine. Young girls do like the color. The element is primarily water, and it's usually yin. I don't use an awful lot of purple other than for some accents. Earth tones, browns are considered sort of solid and reliable to everybody. Men like the color quite a bit. And earth tones are going from a very light beige to a dark brown. The element is earth. It's often pretty yin, but it can become yang the lighter you get. I like using particular shades of beige. White symbolizes cleanliness and purity. It really reflects light well, which can be very advantageous, but sometimes it might be too much, too harsh. Yes, it shows dirt, and it could be very difficult to keep it clean. The element, as some folks forget, is metal. Now, it's mostly yang, but again, a cool white is slightly more yin. And we'll get into cool and warm whites in a little bit. Black is definitely a color of authority and power. It's very dramatic, but it's also often very overpowering if you're using it in large amounts, like you see in this picture below. It's a great secondary or accent color. The element is, of course, water, and it's very, very yin. Gray is one of my favorite go-to colors. It's associated with quite a bit of elegance itself. It intensifies other colors. So if you use gray on the walls, it's going to intensify your accessories quite a bit. which can be very, very positive. Adding gray to any color moves it towards being a neutral. And please keep that in mind. That's the way I think right there. My neutrals are going to be a little different than maybe the neutrals you're used to. The element is metal, and it is definitely yin. Here's that room again. And just by changing it to a gray, it's still quite elegant, but more acceptable. Now, there are a lot of different color schemes. I'm going to name three that everybody uses in interior design, home staging, and so forth. Analogous is three or more colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. For example, these three. And if you notice in the picture above, they've done a nice job of pulling them together. It makes sense to us on a conscious and subconscious level. It makes sense. It works well. It's not confusing. So it does work really nice. It's very progressive and not startling. We don't want startling when we're trying to sell a house normally. But sometimes three colors next to each other in a different room like this kitchen can be unsettling. So it's best to make sure you use three colors next to each other that work in a specific room. Complementary is using two colors that are on opposite sides of the color wheel. Very, very strong contrast. And they're used, as you probably know, with particular athletic teams, particular schools. For example, here in Florida, the University of Florida uses blue and orange as their colors. They're on opposite sides, and they really contrast really well. They're very powerful, and that's what they want. Louisiana State, LSU, uses a yellow and a purple. Again, great contrast. And the top two colors, red and green, are used by the University of Miami as examples. Okay? But they're really, really bold and quite often don't work very well in selling a house. Again, opposite side of the color wheel. As you can see in that picture on the top left, contrast is immense. And sometimes that might be to your advantage. But if you look at the picture on the right-hand side, it's a staircase with orange walls and a blue runner downstairs. It can be quite startling. Monochromatic is using a single color, but just changing the shade, adding some gray. And they're very soothing and pleasing to the eye. They work very well in particular rooms like a bedroom. So monochromatic colors are the most yin. Like I said, I use them a lot in bedrooms. They work well in bathrooms. Analogies are also very restful for us and can work very well in the other rooms in a house. But complementary, which are the most yang, are really the least restful. So I don't really use them anywhere when I'm trying to sell a house, other than in very small portions. And you've already heard this before, but warm colors, which are on one side of the color wheel, advance and excite someone, whereas the yin colors on the other side of the color wheel recede in lower energy. So please keep that in mind, that we want to make sure we get the correct mix in rooms that are more active and in rooms that are more sleepy or interior. So you got to keep in mind the purpose and location of the room. If it's a bedroom, all right, we need to make sure it comes off in a good ratio of yin to yang. If it's a bedroom, again, more yin, 60-40, 70-30. You need to consider the orientation of the room, how much natural light comes in. That can really change your perspective. The size of the room, if it's really small or really large, that also needs to come into play. You need to get very good at using focal points. And of course, the emotional tone can play a very important role in how a person actually looks at the room. Now here's the floor plan with a letter overlying, and the Q is for quiet, the S is for social, and the W in the kitchen is a workroom. So where the Q's are, okay, I'm going to try to go more with yin colors. Where the social are, I need to go the other direction somewhat. In some cases, maybe a little more, in some cases, a little less. So when we get to the dining room, okay, I really look at the dining room and the family room a little bit differently, even though they're both social. So you lay your bagua over it, okay? That also is going to help you to consider what colors I need to bring in. Again, you need to know the dominant elements before you start choosing your favorite colors. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So lay the bagua over it to give you more information before you start saying to your client, try this color. No, use this one. So the orientation of the room, the northern light is more muted and less dramatic. So if that's what's coming in that particular room, the colors are actually going to be more subdued. They're going to gray down a bit, you might say. In the southern light, it's a little sharper and creates stronger contrast. If you go with really bright colors here, it could be really, really harsh. So you might want to tone it down a little bit. And east and west really depends on when the room is used or when that room is actually going to be maybe even seen in a showing. So I wouldn't worry as much about those two. But I definitely would take into account the northern light and the southern light. The size of the room is something that can really stop a sale. You know that. You know that the more square footage a house seems to feel like or show like, the better chance it has of selling. The bigger the room, the more intense the color will feel. If we painted this room, which is actually a fairly good sized bedroom, all of that shade of blue, it would be very, very intense. Use the strongest color, in this case that blue, in the smallest amounts. And the eye will actually be drawn right to that intense color. Again, that's a focal point, as is that light in between the two beds. The line of sight can be something you need to take into account. You need to unify the color flow. This house, which I did in Charleston, South Carolina, about 8 years ago, had a problem. It was very choppy, and it was because of the color scheme they chose. So you need to unify a situation like this more by using a common color. You might go with a lighter shade in that dining room to the right. But you need to actually unify, in this case, two rooms that make up one space. Always emphasize a focal point. You want to have a focal point in every room, and using color psychology can be very helpful to you. Okay, emphasize architectural features, or crown molding, or gorgeous arched windows. Okay, use the contrasting paint on that particular wall, and it will make it stand out even more. So again, there's a lot of ways to create focal points. You can use it with groupings of paintings like this. You notice they not only have the paintings, but they have that wall a particular different shade than the walls on the left and the right. Now, an important slide. To make a room appear wider, use a darker color on the shorter wall and a lighter color on the longer wall. If you go back to this first picture, that is what's going on in this case. It actually makes the width seem or feel bigger than it actually really is. Now, I know the ceilings with a darker colors become a little more attractive to some folks, but I never ever do ceilings with a darker color. It just gives us more of a closed-in effect. It actually drops the ceiling somewhat. I always want to use a lighter color on the ceiling. You know, if I'm not sure, I'll go ahead with a shade of white, but I want to have the ceiling sort of raise up instead of lower down. Again, we don't want to show limitations, so don't make your ceilings dark. Now, in a dining room, you know, I know there's a lot of dining rooms out there that are using very bright colors, and some of that is definitely not only good, but probably even necessary. But I'd rather use them as accents. They do need to be more yang, but I keep it closer to 60-40 than 70-30. I keep it closer to 60-40. I don't want extremes in here. I want it to be a very comfortable place for the family or your friends to get together. Not harsh, but definitely not sleepy either. 60-40. These particular pictures of dining rooms, you know, all have certain things going for them that I wanted to show to you. The one on the left-hand side is the way I would do that table. I wouldn't put an awful lot of stuff out there. I love the centerpiece. Really works nicely. There's not a lot of clutter on that table. But you can see there's a lot more clutter on the bottom right picture, which again creates a more busy feel. Too much stimuli. To me, that's clutter. And then in the top right-hand picture, that dining room shows up really nicely too because of the color on the walls and also the centerpiece. All of these colors on the walls work just fine. Now this living room, you may or may not like it. To me, it doesn't work at all. This color, the only thing good about it is that it's reflective. There's an awful lot of sunlight coming into this room. We already have all this white furniture, which helps with the reflection. But then we have a wall color that's very reflective too. Definitely would like to have a little more contrast in here. And to me, it's a little bit over the top in one direction. This is definitely the same way. There's a den in the back of the house. This den is, as you can probably tell by looking at through the windows, is in the back left-hand corner of the house. Beautiful windows, but the back left-hand corner, as you know by now, is actually in the wealth section, which is dominant wood. And fire with the wood has a little bit of a problem. So we're really dousing the effect of somebody's wealth in this location. That's one thing. But the red, to me, should always be used as an accent color. I would never paint the walls red. Maybe a single wall, if necessary, but definitely not all of the walls in a room. The red couches, the red walls make this very, very fiery. This room is very long and thin. And if I was to tell them what to do, I would tell them to paint the wall on the left and the wall on the right a lighter shade. If you remember, you want to use a darker color on the wall that is the smallest, and therefore creating the impression that the room is a little wider than it really is. So I like the color pretty well, although it's a color I'd rather probably use in a bedroom. So therefore, it probably needs a lot more of the yang element, accessories and colors in here. But that one wall down at the end with the fireplace is a great focal point. It shows off beautifully, but the walls on the left and the right I would change. This living room is too earthy. It's also got too much furniture. And so therefore it's a little difficult to move around. Way too earthy. Before I get to the color, I want you to notice the love seat down at the end with its back to the window. That's not a good place for it. Where the two chairs are at 45 degrees on the right-hand side, I'd switch them. And I don't even think that little chair down at the end is very helpful at all. Again, it's too earthy. This room is actually located in the helpful people area of this house. Dominant metal. So we need to bring more of the metal element in here. I like the color of the walls fine, but I would have liked to have seen a little different contrast, either in the furniture and definitely in the rug and the pillows. Here's the room in the back of the house. It's got a lot of metal to it. I hope you see it. Even in the lamp right there, we have it's a sphere. It's also made of metal. The shade is white. The walls are white, and so forth. There is wood, there is metal, and there's really very little else. So definitely they need to do something to bring the other elements in to some degree. Even the flowers are white. The foyer, of course, is the fourth of 8 most impressionable moments when somebody is looking whether or not to buy a particular house. So when you walk in, you want to make sure that, of course, the foyer comes off very positively right away. These are both very lovely areas in these pictures. And I do like very much how they actually enhanced all the beautiful trim on the right-hand side. Very nicely done. They also have a piece of furniture which creates the meandering effect. I think they probably could use a mirror to the left-hand side of that door. The right-hand side, the left-hand picture has got a color that I prefer not to use in the foyer. I really want it to be a little more yang than this. A gray in this area, for me, does not work. Kitchen. Top left-hand picture, the walls being red definitely never works for me. In a kitchen, definitely doesn't work. And we have all that wood, and then we have fire. Those are the two dominant colors, dominant elements by quite a bit, and they're fighting each other. So I would definitely change the walls on that. Top right-hand picture, it's got a lot of good things going for it, but it's a little too much metal for me. So again, I would want to bring in some accents. You can imagine in that top right-hand picture bringing in some of the color red, which actually would create a great deal of contrast. Bottom right-hand picture, pretty much the same type of thing. It's really over the top with respect to 2 elements. I need to bring the other 3 in. Of course, I need to know what the location of these rooms are to start with, and that would help me a great deal of how I get started. Now the lighting, of course, in the kitchen is very, very helpful and can be very powerful. But again, we want to stay away from an awful lot of overhead fluorescent lighting. So I like the lighting in these a great deal. So if that's even a possibility when you're working with somebody, definitely a great way to change the mood. The master bedroom is a place to rest and restore yourself. We're going to use more yin colors in here. Okay. The growing trend, as it says here, is to more natural neutrals like greens and browns and some gray blues. This bedroom, of course, as you can probably figure out, is not going to work for me. Very bad wall color. Definitely would keep this person wide awake. This might even be worse. You even have a beam over top the bed. You have a couple of ceiling fans, which creates somewhat of a problem for somebody too. With all that forceful energy, there is a cure for the ceiling fan above the bed, and that is to actually put a faceted crystal on that ceiling fan, therefore redistributing the energy that comes off that fan. So it has a lot of bad things going for it in this particular room. I like the color, and it works well with the beach. That's what you see outside that door. That color probably wouldn't work very well with respect to other parts of the country. Very dramatic, very vibrant, almost too much. Now, this room actually probably goes the other direction a little bit. It's almost too toned down. It has no fire to it. All bedrooms should have some fire in them. So using the pillows possibly or the comforter to change that situation would help a lot. Maybe even a painting above the bed. So this is actually going the other direction. It's a little bit too subdued. We don't want it to go too far one way or the other. This one has got too much of a good thing. It has too much natural light for us to go with all white like this. Again, we need to tone it down some. I like it, but it still doesn't quite work because we're missing some of the other elements. It feels out of balance. If you look at the picture, it's just too much of one thing. This bedroom is definitely getting better. I want you to notice these three pieces of furniture down at the end of the bed. That's always a very nice way to give the person in the bed a feeling of more security, an extra buffer to actually redirect energy around the bed instead of going over top of the person. Okay, I like to have something down there if I have the room. If I don't have the room, no way do you put anything there. Okay, it has a lot of other good things going for it with respect to the colors. It has earth, it has water, it even has wood. Could add a touch of fire. This bedroom is in a fairly inexpensive home and has done a lot of really great things with the little room that they have. They might take the wall where the bed is up against and maybe change that to a darker color to just create the idea that the room is a little bit wider than it really is. But it's got a lot of nice things going for it. It's quite symmetrical. You take a line right down the center of that bed, it's pretty much the same on both sides. I like the color scheme. I do want to draw your attention, though, to the dresser on the right-hand side. One of the sharp corners points directly at where they lay their head. So possibly that dresser needs to be either moved further down towards the window or further towards the entrance into the room or softened. This one is done very, very well. Again, very symmetrical. It's got a lot of the different elements in here right away. It's lacking a little bit of fire. You don't have to have a great deal. But we need a little bit of that. But otherwise, I really like what they've done. Here's an example of the sage green, a lighter version. Again, it really does show off a room really nicely. I also like what it does with respect to the trim. It really displays the trim beautifully. The sage green, of course, is a wood element. Again, we have something down at the end of the bed that creates the extra buffer, more of a feeling of security for that person. So it's got an awful lot of really nice features going for it. Bathrooms are also more yin. So if you look at the bathroom at the top left, I think you'll agree with me that it's, again, too much. The one on the bottom left comes off very well. The one on the right-hand side has got too much water in it. So the least thing you would do is to change the color of the ceiling. There's that red bathroom again. So just changing it to the gray gives that shower curtain an awful lot of contrast and really looks like it's in more of a balance. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, we were going to discuss warm white and cool white. And it does make a difference. A warm white definitely comes off as a little more yang, a little more comfortable for some folks. Cool whites work really well in bedrooms. And there's an example of them. So by adding yellow to the white, you're going to get a little more of a warm white. If you add a little blue or maybe a gray, you get a cool white. So adding black, gray, or white to a vibrant color can create a neutral shade, tint, or tone. For example, with the blue, if you add gray, you get a blue-gray. If you add green, if you add gray to green, you get a sage green. The picture below is, of course, an example of blue-gray, which works really well in most bedrooms. These are the neutrals that I use. I don't really deviate from this. I pretty much know the particular color in a Lowe's or in a Home Depot. These are the colors that I come up with. I have several different shades of sage green that I actually promote if I'm trying to get more of the wood element into a room. In metal, I use more warm whites and grays. Again, I like using different shades of gray, and I use different shades of gold. In earth, I use darker beiges and lighter yellows. In water, for water, I use green blues and blue grays, and in fire, for the fire element, I use the color of roses. There's a lot of different rose colors out there that work really well, where you're adding just some brown to the reds. Again, different shades of sage green. They work really well in a bedroom, and they come off as very dramatic. There's different shades of blue-grays. Probably my second favorite color that I choose for bedroom. And then, last but not least, I use this color that I've got the arrow pointed to a fair amount when I need to create a little more fire in a room and they want to show off their trim. Now, not everybody's going to want that color. And certainly a male is not going to be probably very happy with pinks and reds. So sometimes they can be totally on board with the color of rose. So that gives you an overview of the colors that I use and the way that I think. It's always important when you walk into a house that you lay the Bagua over first. Write that down so that you have a pretty good idea of what the dominant element is in every room, and then go from there with respect to choosing colors.